Hello, this is Steve Moore, and I'm the Director of Sponsored Programs here at the University of Redlands. And I'm joined by Katie Milsom, who's the Associate Controller in Business and Finance. Um, we're going to talk about seeking funding and finding support, grant funded and contract support here at the university. First question you encounter is, when should I begin preparing to write a proposal? So I usually recommend beginning your proposal effort about a year before you want to submit the proposal. So if you already have a funder with a deadline, it's good to start about a year before you need to submit that proposal. Now, that's in general for complex proposal efforts. Shorter proposals don't take quite that much time, but a complex federal proposal definitely takes a great deal of time and can benefit from spending a year before the deadline to get all of your proposal ideas and documents together. And then you should plan to spend 1 to 3 years to get go from an initial idea to funding. It can take a while to get your proposal together. You'll submit, and many times you are rejected on your first rounds of submissions, and then you'll resubmit. And so, about 3 years down the road, your proposal idea might get funded. In reality, people usually start late when they're going to write a proposal. And I don't discourage people from grabbing opportunities and jumping in. I am a proposal writer myself. I've had a number of successful proposal efforts, and sometimes it's best to seize opportunities and just go for it. So, the Sponsored Programs Office here at the University of Redlands supports that. But we do ask you to give us at least a week or 2 weeks or even a month is optimal, but we will support you in getting your proposal in. Sometimes it's good to just get the ideas together and submit the proposal, get review comments back if your proposal is not successful, and then revise and resubmit. And that second submission often can be the sweet spot for getting funding. And related to that, it's important to plan for success and to learn from failure, particularly if you are submitting a proposal on a tight deadline. Often it's hard to get everything together the way you would want it to be for a tight, nicely done proposal. So sometimes it's best to get it in, get some review feedback, and then to learn from the feedback that you receive from the review panel, and then revise your proposal for the next round for that funder or even a different funder, and then resubmit and keep trying over and over again. So, depending on the funder, the odds of getting funded are fairly low, particularly in federal programs. Success rates can be as low as 3 to 5% or as good as 10 to 20%. But in most cases, the odds of getting funded are not as great as getting rejected. However, if you persevere and you respond to reviewers' comments and you keep submitting, your likelihood of success is going to increase. So I recommend that you choose to learn in the process and be persistent in your grant writing efforts. I recommend that you seek strategic funding, not income. Funding should move your research agenda or your teaching agenda or departments or program or organization towards where it wants to go. So you use grant funding or contract funding to move the organization in a particular direction. It gives the fuel that allows an organization to do that. And in this time of transition for liberal arts universities like the University of Redlands, this can be a very important way for the university or the institution to move itself in particular directions. So I recommend avoiding writing proposals just for the income. Leverage your success. So funders like to support projects that are likely to succeed. That's a big part of grant writing success, is to demonstrate to funders that you know what you're doing, you have a great idea, and you can get it done. So I recommend that you go with your strong suit. Develop an idea that plays off of your strengths and capabilities that are demonstrable, and then convince funders that you will succeed with the project that you're proposing, and you will make the program officers look good for supporting your project. I also say, though, is to don't contort yourself too much. Define your project before you even seek funding. Think about really what you want to accomplish in your career, and then seek funding that will support that. Of course, you're going to have to adjust and innovate and adapt your ideas to fit funding opportunities, but don't go too far with that. It gets disingenuous if you're a proposal reviewer and you see people twisting themselves into all kinds of contortions to try to fit a program. Don't try to think about what a funder wants to have funded. Think about what you want to have funded, and then adapt to the particular program that's you are responding to. So let's talk about the proposal development process here at the University of Redlands, this is a slide from our website, which I'll be introducing a little bit later in this presentation. Our process of proposal development is generally has four different stages. It has the consultation process, the development process, the routing process, and the submission process. So let's go through each of these steps in turn and talk a little bit about them. We do have a one-page sheet which summarizes everything that we will be talking about in this presentation, and this is downloadable from the sponsored programs website, which I will be getting to a little bit later in the presentation. But the link is provided there at the bottom of the one sheet. It says visit sites.redlands.edu/sponsored-programs/ for forms and other grant related information. So take a look at the site. And here is the website address. All right, the consultation process consists of coming to the sponsored programs office, which is me and Katie Milsom, with a project idea. And I will help you, depending on how fleshed out your project idea is, I will help you come up with your goals and objectives. So one thing I like to do with people is to try to make their project more concrete and something that a reviewer or a program officer can understand and might get behind. As part of that process, you think about who is going to be involved in your project, the timeline for getting things done, uh, milestones. What are you going to accomplish during the project? When are those things going to be accomplished? And what deliverables are going to be produced? And then how is your success going to be evaluated is a big part of a proposal process. And then you start thinking about, in ballpark terms, the funding that's going to be required for accomplishing those milestones. And you try to put these all together. You try to go from your big idea to concrete ideas, goals, and objectives, and then try to think about the timeline over which those things are going to be accomplished, and then how much money is going to be needed to accomplish each of those milestones. So part of the consultation process is for you to sketch out your project idea. I tend to use things like mind maps or concept maps, which I have a very complex example here on the right side of my slide. But just jotting notes, even any time during the day, keep a journal or something, or keep napkins you can write on, or an open screen on your computer where you can just jot down notes and start putting together ideas. And eventually you can put those into a one-page description, a one-page summary of your project. I recommend people to write a summary right off in their proposal process. One of the first things they do. You'll need to revise that summary or that abstract as you move along in your proposal development process. But it's good to have a one-page description. It becomes your calling card for a project. If you're trying to invite collaborators into your effort, or if you want to bounce the idea off of program officers at various funders, a one-page summary is the thing you do that with. So when you're outlining your goals and objectives and your deliverables, you are identifying what you exactly need money for. So at this point, you would ballpark how much money you need and why. And then as you move along, you're going to try to get more and more specific with the monetary needs that you have for your project. And one thing I can't emphasize too much is that being as specific as possible about the money you need, how it's going to be spent, and having good ways to demonstrate that you've done your homework with regard to funding is going to help your proposal success. So once you have your idea fleshed out a little bit and you've figured out approximately how much money you're going to need and what timeline you're going to have, then you start looking for funding opportunities. I'm very familiar with federal funding opportunities, which is a large part of my job, but you can look for private funding for private foundations. You can also look at corporate funding and various other kinds of funding possibilities, governmental, local governmental, state, and things of that nature. Just some examples here. If you are looking for federal opportunities, grants.gov on the web is the central clearinghouse for federal grants. And you can subscribe to various types of opportunity email flows. You can specify the types of agencies you might be interested in, the type of topics, and then you will receive daily or weekly emails summarizing these opportunities and directing you back to more information at grants.gov. I get a complete flow of all opportunities from the government, and I review that every day. I get an email every day, and I parse out opportunities that might be relevant for the university. When you go ahead to submit a federal proposal, then we will work with you to create what's called a grants.gov workspace for submitting your proposal to be forwarded to a particular agency that that has sponsored the funding opportunity. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the submission part of the presentation. Then you can go to particular funders or agencies within the federal government to see what to get better fleshed out descriptions of the opportunities and to see how they organize their opportunities and how they couch them within their funding framework. So this is a list of some of the agencies that people at the University of Redlands tend to look at for funding opportunities. The big one is the National Endowment for the Humanities at NEH.gov. Then we have the National Institutes of Health. This is the clearinghouse for all of the institutes. National Science Foundation at nsf.gov, and then the U.S. Department of Education has its own opportunity list that you can take a look at. Other sources to look for other types of opportunities, you can look on the Opportunities tab on the Sponsored Programs website. I have a way of grouping opportunities and publishing them on a regular basis. It's a Word document that I update on a regular basis that you can access from the site. Also, I will be bringing up a sponsored programs email list, which you can sign up for via the sponsored programs website and on the Contact SPO tab. I will talk about that at the end of the program. Then also another place to look for opportunities are groups that agglomerate or organize opportunities for presentation to nonprofits and others who might be interested in writing proposals. So you have GrantStation at grantstation.com. And then if you're an academic, you could join academia and get the pro level subscription. And there's a grants searching service there as part of academia.edu. And then also the Foundation Center is a good place to look for opportunities, and they have their own subscription services. So once you get down to the consultation stage, or once you get done with the consultation stage, you start refining your project idea and start writing your proposal. So a big part of this is after you've found a funder, is to carefully read the guidelines. And one first step I do to get over the blank page uh, problem of when you go to start a big writing project is to get a Word document going and then outline the proposal section. So you go through the guidelines and you look at what they're looking for as far as a proposal, and then you also look at the review criteria, and you create headings in your document that match each of those requirements and the review criteria. And if you make those headings in your proposal, that will actually help your scoring on your proposal, because it allows the reviewer to go through and match the requirements for how they are supposed to score your proposal against how your proposal is structured. So you start outlining your proposal, and then you'll recruit collaborators. You'll talk with colleagues that might be interested in your project, or you might have colleagues read some of your sections as you're developing them and give you feedback. When you have your project idea fleshed out a little bit with your one-page abstract, you can contact program officers, bounce the idea off of them, and have them tell you whether they think it's a fundable project or what you might need to do to improve your proposal idea. If you can get your hands on sample proposals, you'll want to do that, and to see if see how people have structured their proposals and see what has worked in the past. So one strategy is to contact people who have been successful in a particular proposal round and ask them for a sample proposal. I've done that a number of times. I've given people uh, uh, my successful proposals for them to use as samples in their own work. Attend webinars. Often funders will have one or two or three or more webinars regarding their opportunity, and it's good to attend those and participate. Many times, if you can't make the scheduled webinar, you can register for the event and then get on the list to get the recording of the event. And it's good to pay attention to those webinars, because then you get an opportunity to hear directly from program officers about exactly what they're looking for in a proposal effort, and the kinds of information that is influential in funding decisions. Related to that, it's really important to read FAQs on a funding site, because they will often answer a lot of important questions regarding requirements for a proposal submission and a proposal structure. The bottom line is to do your homework. You need to go beyond the idea that you have a great idea and then that people will just grasp onto, and they'll understand, and they'll award you money just because it's a wonderful idea. Uh, Many wonderful ideas don't get funded because the people writing the proposals don't do their homework to substantiate uh, that this is not only a great idea, that you can get it accomplished and you can put it into action. So doing your homework is a huge part of the development process in writing a proposal. And then you start assembling your documents in the development stage. So there are, yeah, depending on the fund, there'll be different ways that proposals are funded are structured. Sometimes they can be very simple, might be just a few pages. If you get into a federal proposal, they might have 50 to 100 pages that go into your final document. But some of the common things that you'll see in any proposal, like a face page or a cover letter, your proposal abstract, which is usually a one page or less document, uh, describing your project effort, and that might become the public face of the project if the proposal is funded. You'll have a project description or project narrative, which is the meat of the proposal, which may be anywhere from 5 to 50 pages. You have biosketches that many agencies have particular requirements about how much information you can put in a biosketch. So a complete academic vita may not be what they are looking for. It's good to always to structure your biosketches so they pertain to the specific requirements of a funder so that you don't frustrate the reviewers. You'll have letters of commitment, which I've differentiated from letters of support. In general, I don't recommend letters of support. I recommend that you get people who are actually contributing to your project and get them to solidly commit to doing things in a letter of commitment. I have templates for how you structure those kinds of letters. And then, of course, the very important part of a proposal is your budget and budget narrative, which Katie Milsom is going to talk about in this part of the presentation.
Hi, this is Katie Milsom. I'm the Associate Controller and Grant Administrator in the Office of Business and Finance. These slides will give you an overview on the grant budget process. Creating a budget can seem quite intimidating, but do not worry, I am here to help. This slide shows some of the standard budget categories. Each grantor is different and has different requirements for budget categories, so make sure to refer to the request for proposal for your grant to ensure that you are using the proper categories. Salaries and wages would include employees being paid, such as the principal investigator, the co-principal investigator, and any student workers that may be on the grant. Benefits are different rates that are applied to the base of salaries and wages that includes the university's cost for taxes, healthcare, all those side benefits the employee may be enrolled in. Consultant fees would be if you're paying an independent contractor. Travel could include airfare, lodging, daily stipends for meals, and ground transportation. Supplies and materials could be anything else that you need for your grant, such as copy costs, computers purchased, or anything of the sorts. Services could include if you're getting an evaluation or anything like that extra that you're paying someone else for. And then indirect costs is the main way that the university financially benefits from grants and covers the university's overhead costs, which we will discuss in a future slide. Okay, so let's dive into salaries and wages. Salaries and wages are going to be what we pay any employee working on the grant. So if anyone is currently an employee or we're hiring them specifically as an employee for the purpose of the grant, they will be in this category included with salaries and wages. So the main thing that we need to do is to determine how much effort you will be putting into the grant. So there's kind of two ways to determine our effort. So the first way is with course releases. So if you are going to be working on a grant project that is during the time that you're already contracted with the university, we may be able to fund a course release. So that's just giving you time to work during your regularly contracted hours on the grant. These course releases need to be approved from your dean before we begin. But once we begin, this is how we calculate the course release percent effort. So for School of Education, we say that they teach 8 courses in a load. And then of the whole contract, 60% can be attributed to teaching. So if we take 1/8 times 60%, that would equate to 7.5% effort for one course release, and then so on. College of Arts and Sciences is determined basically solely on the number of courses taught, which is 6. So 1/6 of a load would be 16.67% effort, and so on for that. Now, if you work on a grant that's outside of your contracted hours, so during the summer, let's say you're an 11-month contracted employee, you have one summer month. So any work done during that 1 month would be considered above and beyond your regular contract. Like also you could have extra work done during the main hours, so that would entail like a stipend. However, that we do have to make sure we're not going too far above and beyond, because the grantor wants to make sure that it's realistic that you're working that much outside of your regularly contracted hours. And then any work done in addition in the summer months is paid out to you directly, whereas like a course release that we talked about, that's just going to result in budget savings to the university since your salary is already being paid anyway. In addition to employees, you may have other personnel working on the grant, so it is important that we classify them properly. Employees, like we talked about in the salaries and wages section, that's going to be anyone that's already employed by the university, and they must be paid as an employee for the grant through the university's payroll. So we can't pay someone as a independent contractor if they're already employed by the university. And then anyone else hired specifically to work on the grant, where the university is controlling their work schedule and saying you must be here at this time, you must do this thing at this time, that is going to be classified as an employee. And the main distinction of that is that they will show up in the budget in the salaries and wages section. And then also we must make sure to take into account benefits. So that's going to be a little bit of an additional cost to your budget. So we got to keep that in mind. The other type of personnel could be a consultant. So those are third parties that kind of do their own thing and they have their own business and they're not really affiliated with the university, even though they're going to be working on the grant. Those are paid through accounts payable instead of payroll, and we do not need to do any payroll taxes on them or benefits. So if we pay them more than $600 in the calendar year, they will receive a 1099, so they will do their own taxing independently. And then we just got to make sure with consultants that we've talked with them to make sure that we're presenting in the budget a realistic description of their hourly rate and the number of hours that they will be contributing to the grant. As mentioned previously, benefits are part of the cost of paying employees and must be included in your budget. Benefits are an average rate per classification of employees. So full-time faculty, you would take 26% of their salary and add that on top of the salary. Part-time faculty, you'd use 15%. Administrative staff would be 28%. Staff or administrative non-exempt would be 35% of wages, and students use 10% of wages. These rates may change periodically and can be found on the sponsored programs website. It is common when submitting a grant proposal that you may be working with a colleague from another institution. The university can be a subrecipient of a grant award from another institution, or another institution can be a subrecipient of funding from the university. Either way, the subrecipient institution must submit a budget to the prime awardee institution. It is important that I am in contact with the grant office from the other institution so that we can coordinate getting these budgets to each other and that we can make sure we have all the required documentation to submit a successful grant proposal. A letter of support is often required from the subrecipient institution to the prime awardee institution to confirm the commitments being made on this grant. Indirect costs are the primary financial benefit that the university receives from doing grant work. Indirect costs can help to provide budget support to the university and help to cover overhead and administrative oversight expenses associated with grants. If you are working on a federal grant, we will use the university's federally negotiated indirect cost rate of 51.4% on the basis of salaries and wages. So it sounds a little bit high, but keep in mind this is only going to be on that salaries and wages category that we discussed. It would not include benefits or any other costs in the grant. This rate was negotiated with the Department of Health and Human Services, and it is renegotiated every 4 years. And our agreement, which will be requested by the grantor, can be found on the sponsored programs website. If you're working on a private or foundation grant, they may offer a lower rate, such as 10% of all direct costs. If your budget is a smaller budget, the indirect costs can take up a good chunk of it. So it is sometimes beneficial to the university to still do the grant, even if we can't get indirects. So we can request waiving of the indirect costs from your dean, but we need to make sure that we get that approval because we don't want to give up the benefit to the university unless the dean has agreed that there are other benefits in the grant. This is a sample budget form that I developed, and there is a template of this available on the sponsored programs website. Just keep in mind that each grantor is going to have its own budget category, so you need to make sure to first refer to your request for proposal to get those budget categories, and then you can modify the template to be in line with that. Other grantors will have their own template, so you can use that instead, but this is just a helpful working copy that I like to use in developing the grant. And oftentimes we'll take the total numbers from this spreadsheet and we will put it into their template when we submit the proposal. So just kind of going through each category, we've kind of already touched on some of these, but salaries and wages, this is where you'll list out like your principal investigator, the co-principal investigator, any student workers, the little percentage where you can see the 33%, that's going to be that percent effort that we talked about. So if you were doing a course release and you're in School of Ed, you would put the 7.5%. If you were working one summer month, you may say, I'm going to devote 10% effort during one summer month. So you would put the 10% there. So that's kind of how that works. And then the fringe benefits is going to be for every person listed in the salaries and wages category. You're going to also need to have them have fringe benefits in that second section. So if you look at in the notes column, there's that green shaded areas with the little red caret in the corner. In the live template, if you do a drop down on that note, it will show you the current rates of benefits for each classification of employee. Consultant fees, that's where you would list out any consultants. In the notes column, it would be good to say like the number of hours that you're planning to have them work and their hourly rate, just so as we calculate, we kind of can see what we're using as a basis for our calculations. Travel, same thing, you can list out maybe the different trips you're taking and then just detail out, you know, what your assumption is for airfare, lodging, all that kind of stuff. I did find a useful site at gsa.gov, and it does let you enter in the area where you're traveling, and it gives you a good per diem rate based on the area where you're traveling, as well as like average hotel costs by month. So that's really helpful in creating a realistic travel budget. And then the other categories below, you have supplies and materials and services and other costs. Then it totals up the total direct costs. And then if your grant allows for total indirect costs, that would go in that bottom section. And if it's a federal grant, we would use our 51.4% of salaries and wages, which is the total of section 1 above. And if it is another grant, we may put in like 10%, or maybe there are no indirects, and we would just leave that blank. A couple of other things to note on this is that this template set up for 3 years, but different grants may be different periods. So it is important when you start the budget that you know what the period of the grant is so that we can make sure to reflect the proper amount of time. And also each year we may want to build in a little inflation. Usually we'll use 3%. I know this is a different environment right now, but in standard times we would use about 3% a year just to kind of calculate. Sometimes years may cross over fiscal years, so that's where I can help you kind of figure out if, you know, one year may be 2 different rates of salary or whatnot, and we can kind of work to figure that out together. The blue shaded areas are for cost share. So that's if the grant requires the university to do a match or to also contribute some cost. And they oftentimes will do that because they want to see that we are also committed to the grant and that we are putting in our own resources. So if that's a requirement, those fields are there. Other times they may not require it, but it may be beneficial just to show that we do that, just to make sure that, you know, we're getting credit for anything that we already are paying for. So maybe, for example, you have a student worker that, you know, is already budgeted for in your budget, but they have some extra capacity and they'll be working with you on the grant. So maybe we could show that, you know, 2 hours a week we're going to contribute, but the university's paying for that. So stuff like that, or even like travel, if you have your own travel budget and you are going to just kind of coordinate the budget you already have to go to something for your grant, we can include that in there as well. All right, so then the total column, those are just going to be the numbers that will likely carry forward into the grantor's template. Once we've built our budget using our budget template, the next step is to create a budget justification. The grantor wants to see the details of how we arrived at the numbers on our budget. And like I said, they'll oftentimes have you just submit the totals for each category, which lacks all the detail that we spelled out in the budget template. So this is our chance to go through and show the grantor how we arrived at our numbers and how the different expenses will support the overall goals and objectives of our grant. So we just want to make sure that the reviewer is aware that we've been thoughtful in coming up with our numbers and that they're accurate costs and that it is going to support our grant objectives. So we're going to detail out names, responsibilities, how much effort they're going to contribute. For student workers, you'd want to detail out how many students, how many dollars per hour, how many hours per week, and how many weeks. For fringe benefits, we would list like the institutional rates for the different classifications of employees, as well as the total for each type of category of employee that we have in our grant. Consultant fees, that's where we want to drill in and say, you know, this is the hourly rate and how many hours we're expecting our consultant to work on the project. And again, we just want to make sure that the budget categories on here match with the budget template that we developed, which match in accordance with the grantor's budget categories. So you'll go through, this is only one page of usually about 2 pages, but it'll go on for all the different categories that you have in your grant, and at the end it'll show a total. And this template is also available on our sponsored programs website. The last step in our process here is going to be our grant routing form. And this is a very important step because this is where we document the approval that we have obtained and that, you know, we're making sure that everyone is signing off on the different commitments that we are making by applying for this grant. So this here, you can see an example of our proposal routing form, also found on our sponsored programs website. Page 1 starts off with just some basic details of the grant. So you would put your name and information, who the grantor is, the deadline where you found the RFP, the type of grant, and then that middle section boxed out called course release time, cost sharing, and indirect costs. That is important because that is where we are documenting, you know, whether or not you're requesting course release time, whether or not the university is required to have any cost sharing, and then whether or not we are getting any indirects off this grant or whether we are waiving it. So when the dean or, you know, vice president for finance is signing on the next page, they are agreeing to all this. So obviously you want to have talked to them about all these items before they see this form so that they're aware of it, but their official approval is documented on this form. The second page is slightly hidden, but basically those are just a bunch of compliance questions, and either myself or Steve Moore can help you if you have questions as we submit this. And then at the bottom, the approval is documented. So the 4 people that need to sign off on this would be, first of all, be the person submitting the grant. So the principal investigator would need to sign. For sponsored programs, that's basically just saying that, you know, I have reviewed the budget. So I'm usually the one that signs that section. Then your dean or provost, they're signing off obviously to make sure they've approved any course release time, indirects or waiving of indirects, and that the project's activities and purposes are consistent with the mission of the university. And then lastly, our vice president for finance, CFO, will sign just to make sure, you know, that it meets the university standards and that we are aware of what we are committing the university to through this. Steve Moore brilliantly developed this form into Adobe Sign, so it is now a pretty seamless process to get this signed. It used to be that I'd have to carry it around campus to like 3 different places to get it signed, but now if everyone's at their desk looking at their email, it can be done in a matter of like minutes. So once you're ready to submit, Steve Moore can help you get that going and routed. I think we officially asked for a 2-week notice. Obviously we can do it quicker, but the main thing is that we ask that you don't wait until the last minute. We want to make sure, in case someone is not at their desk, that we give ample time, or if further review or questions arise through this process, we want to make sure that we're giving everyone time to kind of review this properly. And then oftentimes when we route this, we'll accompany a copy of the budget justification, and then maybe like your one paragraph overview of your grant project. Well, that wraps up our session on the grant budget process. I guess the main thing I want you to take away from this session is that I am here as a resource to you when you're developing your grant. So all the things that we talked about, you don't have to have memorized or do it all alone. I am here to help, and I'm happy to help with your budget template and your grant budget justification form, as well as the grant routing form. So when you're to the point of applying for a grant, I want to make sure that you're comfortable reaching out and asking any questions and making sure that we can have a successful grant application together. So just listed on this slide are my contact information, my desk number here at the university, and then my email address. So feel free to reach out, and best of luck to you in your grant pursuits.
Okay, so you've got your budget done, your budget narrative, and you've put all that together. Your proposal has been routed through proper channels here at the university, and everyone's signed off and approved. So then you get to the submission process, and typically the sponsored programs office submits proposals on behalf of the university for the proposal writer. So federal proposals require the sponsored programs person an official from the university to do the final submission. And the purpose of that is basically underscoring the whole idea of routing a proposal, is that they want to make sure that the university has approved this effort, and that they are willing to accept the responsibility for managing the project if the proposal gets funded, if the project idea gets funded. So we will be the ultimate person that pushes the button where your proposal gets submitted, and then typically your email and our sponsored programs emails and possibly other people at the university will be on an email list that might be notified at each stage of the process of as the proposal makes its way through, for example, grants.gov or other automated systems that the funders have. And then eventually you'll get a decision on your proposal, which will come from a program officer, in which sponsored programs and the project or the proposal writer, project director, or the principal investigator are notified by email about the results of the review effort. It's good to submit 2 to 3 days in advance before a deadline. It gets stressful if you're on the final day, getting all your documents together and pushing a button, a few hours or minutes before the deadline. So it's good for a more relaxed life to submit as far in advance of a deadline as you can. Uh, All right, well, that's pretty much our presentation. We plan on having future sessions on things like refining proposal ideas, finding funders, developing solid budgets, writing fundable proposals, revising proposals, and then Katie and I are very open to uh, having one-on-one and group consultations on any topic that you're interested in the funding or the sponsored programs world. To contact us, visit the sponsored programs website, which is sites.redlands.edu/sponsored-programs/ and you'll see my email address and phone number, as well as Katie's email address and phone number, as well as the official sponsored programs snail mail address there on the bottom half of the website. I do encourage you to get on our email list by clicking the link provided on the sponsored programs page. All you have to do is click the link, and you may have to log in with your University of Redlands credentials, and then you'll be automatically added to the list and I hope to send out emails every week or so beginning in January 2021. Well, thank you for your attention during this presentation, and if you have any questions or comments, please direct them to Katie and myself. Thank you very much.